Helen, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great. I mean, Helen, you have to understand, Helen has been a huge help to me. So I had a moment where I thought really she should be helping lots of other people as well because she's so good at it, which is why we're doing this podcast. So you've been helping me with a fiction book, but you also do non-fiction
Yes, that's
editing
right.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So today I thought what we could talk about is how you could help people in business who want to write a book because it's become really quite popular thing to do. And lots of people have lots of information they want to share and talk to people about and things they've learned over their careers. So
Yes.
we can have a look at how they go about that and how you can help somebody with that. So from your point of view, as somebody who's been in publishing all your life and have a huge amount of knowledge to share, what do you see as being the real benefits for somebody doing a non-fiction book?
Yeah. Well, yes. Why write non-fiction or indeed fiction? And I think that a book can do something that a LinkedIn post or a keynote speech can't replicate, which is that it can sustain a sort of serious thought over the space of 100 pages, 200 pages. It sort of says to whoever you want to speak to with your book, I've interrogated the subject deeply enough that I can fill this amount of space. And I think for someone in business that carries a huge amount of weight, both with clients, with media, with potential partners. And so it can be your sort of ultimate long form business card, if you like. It's kind of not just your contact
Yeah.
details, it's your thoughts. And also, I do think, just to touch on fiction a little bit as well, fiction can also give you something that a straightforward business book potentially can't, which is permission to tell truths rather obliquely. You can, explore an incredibly toxic boardroom, a very claustrophobic kind of leadership situation, or a crisis of conscience. The ups and downs of a career, really, in a way that is hard to do in a memoir or in a how-to guide. You can't be accused of naming names when you've given everyone different names. And so I think, that kind of fictionalized version of an industry can also be quite sort of refreshing. If you look at, regardless of what you think of their politics, writers like Jeffrey Archer or Chris Mullen coming at novels from their own experience. Laura Weisberger, when she wrote The Devil Wears Prada, for obvious professional and legal reasons, she couldn't do that as a sort of memoir, but we all know who she was writing about.
Usually the people that sort of do books tend to be quite big in terms of personality, if you know what I mean. So
Yes.
they feel they have something to say. I mean, the majority of us are much more sort of get on with our day-to-day jobs, but I mean, a lot of people feel that they don't have something to say, but often really do, because they've seen things in a way maybe some of the leaders won't have seen them from the ground, or from really being on the front line of their business. What would you say to those people if they feel a bit worried about, I'd like to
Yes.
do it, but do I actually have something to say?
Do I have a story? Yeah. I hear this a lot, and I think it's almost always incorrect. People who think their story is, perhaps unremarkable are quite often the ones who really have a story that's worth telling. Sometimes we tend to sort of internalize so thoroughly what we know that we stop seeing it as kind of extraordinary. I mean, I think we've all kind of been had that experience of sort of talking to someone who doesn't know our business or our industry at all, and finding ourselves not meaning remotely to be to talk in a way that they wouldn't understand, but sort of forgetting that you're so indoctrinated into your own world that sort of certain terminology and the way that certain things work have become second nature, and they're simply not to the person you're talking to. They're kind of interesting and new to the person you're talking to. So I think that, the question isn't really, is my story unique? Because everyone's story is unique. It's, have I found an angle that's going to make it sort of useful or resonant to a reader? And that's an editorial question, really. It's not a lived-in experience problem. It's not in terms of your lived-in day-to-day life. And I don't think it really matters what stage of your career you're at. A book written mid-career while you're still right in the thick of something has a kind of energy and an honesty that actually sometimes a retrospective can sort of slightly lack. So, but that said, if you are someone who's retired and wants to kind of look back at a career, that retrospective can also have a very satisfying sort of narrative arc. So both have value, and neither is wrong. And I think that, everyone, it's a cliche to say everyone has a story, but I think the question isn't whether we have a story, it's how we tell it, and how we think about it, and who we want our readers to be.
And I think, is it that sort of starting point that's perhaps one of the most important places, is getting going on the wrong track. It's like taking the wrong road, isn't it, right at the start,
Yes.
and ending up in Glasgow when you were going to Cornwall or something. Do you think the biggest and most important bit, and probably where most people go wrong, is sort of launching off into something without really thinking through where they're going first?
Yes, and I think that the most fundamental question you need to sort of ask at the very beginning of the process is, who is this for? Not necessarily who might buy it. Of course, there's, depending on what kind of publishing you're interested in doing, or where you want your book to go, of course it's interesting and important to have a sense of the market and of the commerciality of it. But really the most fundamental question at the beginning of the process is, who is it for? Who are you actually in conversation with when you write it? What do you want that person to feel, or to know, or to learn, or to do differently by the time the book is over? And I think a second potential mistake, which is related, is sort of confusing having a lot to say with having a very clear argument. So if you're a leader in business, or if you've been in your business for a long time, you tend to arrive with a lot of experience and a kind of, experience generosity, really. You want to share all of it. But books can never really be just sort of data dumps. They have to, there needs to be a sort of through line. There needs to be something that it's for. And you have to extract from all of that experience that you've had what that clear through line is. So you get clarity before you start writing, really, which will save months of sort of circular drafting. It's that straight line through.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes complete sense. So when somebody comes to you, and like recently, I asked somebody who works with me, Kim, to come and talk to you because she had a great idea for a book, and I thought it'd be a great waste if she didn't try and get it down on paper. What's the first things you need to know from that person in order to get them going forward?
Yes. Well, I think, in the case of Kim, she has a very strong idea for a book, and she is still at the beginning of that process, and wanted to sort of talk through that idea. I think if you have a book that you think you want to write, I think you need to understand what for you success will look like. Is it why do you want to write the book? Because I want to write a book means wildly different things for different people. For some, this could be a sort of legacy kind of project. So, crystallizing what you've learned throughout the course of your career before you step back. For someone else, it might be that it's a sort of business developmental tool, or a platform building exercise, or something that you genuinely feel that you want to write for reasons that you can't quite articulate. And I think all of those reasons are valid, but they lead to different books and different ways of measuring whether you've got there and whether you've succeeded. So I think having a think about what success looks like for you, what is it that you want to achieve? And of course, for people that in business who are writing books, it can be anything from wanting, as I say, to crystallize a huge wealth of experience, to wanting to provide something that sort of is something for clients to look at, for clients to sort of understand what your business is, and for you to say, we've been doing it for this amount of time, and look at what we've achieved, and here's where we're going in the future. So it can perform a number of different functions, and I think it's sort of having in your mind what the purpose is of what you're writing.
Oh, that's great advice. And also, there's the whole issue about whether they come to you as a ghostwriter for them, or an editor, or a mixture of the two. Could you explain what those terms mean if people aren't particularly familiar with them?
Yes. So I think when it comes to sort of ghostwriting or editing, the question really is whether you are somebody who is very au fait with writing yourself, or somebody that has sort of ideas and wants help to sort of shape them. So when it comes to ghostwriting, this would be a kind of situation where I would have a long beginning exploratory conversation with a writer, finding out what it is that they want to write, what their story is, what their background is, the reasons for them wanting to write the book. And then we would work together on a book. I would produce chapters and we'd talk them through as the process was going on. When it comes to editing, it's more of a case of shaping what's already there. So a writer will come to me and sort of say, I've written a first draft, but I'm aware it's not really in very good shape, or I'm worried it's not in very good shape. Could you sort of help me with it? And to some extent, the processes will be quite similar. I will then read that draft, and depending on the book, depending on the length, go through it, possibly chapter by chapter or section by section, and suggest edits. And they can be everything from, to start with, that will be an overall shaping edit. So in terms of content and the direction of the book and the actual what's down on the page, right the way through to the more sort of detailed, niggly, swapping sentences around, etc., etc. So I think in terms of whether you feel you need a ghostwriter or an editor, it's whether you sort of think, I've got all these ideas in my head, but I don't really know how to put them onto paper. Or whether you think, I've written all these notes and I've got these ideas written down and I want someone to help me shape them. I suppose that would be the difference there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So just to summarise then, the process, sort of from start to finish, if somebody comes to you to the end of actually producing the book, what would that process look like? And what sort of timescales are often normal for that sort of thing?
So it would start with a sort of... starting to work with someone would start with a long sort of exploratory conversation, sometimes several conversations, where really what I'm trying to do is understand what they want to say, how they think, what they care about, and also crucially during those conversations, what we keep coming back to when we wander off topic. The thing that you keep coming back to is often where the real book lies. And then moving into sort of structure, so a more detailed outline that we can interrogate together, probably put together by me as a rough draft or put together jointly, so that then we can sort of pull something apart at that stage. And from there, sort of depending on whether I'm ghostwriting or whether we're working with their drafts, so responding and questioning and pushing, I'm then producing drafts as we go along. That would almost or certainly be the process. There would be some exceptions to that. If it was, for example, a very short piece of business writing, then it might be the case that I would take what had been written, or if I'm in the case of me ghostwriting itself, write it myself, and then deliver the whole thing, and then me and the author would go through it together. But in the case of longer forms of writing, which is normally the case, it would be done sort of chunk by chunk. But the initial kind of planning stage would be very important, and that is extracting exactly what the book is and what the author wants the book to be, and how we're going to get there, and the sort of highlights, pulling out from the author really the highlights of how to get there. And I think that is one of the challenges for the editor or the ghostwriter. As I mentioned before, when you're kind of knee deep in your own profession, in your own business, I've had it before when I've worked with writers where they sort of skim over something very dramatic and really want to talk to you about another thing, and you sort of say, hold on a minute, you've just skimmed over that really dramatic bit. And the thing that you're really honing in on here is okay, it's interesting, but it's not that, you're missing the headline here. And I think that's where an editor or a ghostwriter can really help you. It's sort of being able to see from an outside perspective. I don't know your business at all. You know your business very well, but from a kind of layperson's perspective, when it comes to your particular field of expertise, I can sort of see what's interesting and the nuggets that can be pulled out. So it starts with, as I say, a long conversation or a series of conversations, and it kind of starts quite large and gets narrower and narrower, and then becomes the sort of drafting stage.
Yeah, and it's much more manageable with a focus. Yeah, no, I can see that. So what do you find, what do people find the hardest bit of doing all this? Where do they sort of really start to struggle a bit, perhaps?
I think what people find hard is, well, as I've sort of mentioned, wondering if they've got enough to say, wondering if their story is kind of interesting enough. And I think that is easily overcome, as I say, because you tend to not be able to see the most interesting bits of your own story sometimes. Worrying that perhaps, if I'm not myself particularly confident writing in long form, is this worth my time? And of course, people can help you to do that, so it potentially is. And and there can be also obviously sort of personal worries that go with it, confidentiality worries. Is it all right to talk about this? Should I be disguising the identities of everybody or not? There can be worries of that nature. So yeah, I think it tends to generally be sort of to do with content first and foremost. Is there enough of a story here? And also the other worry which is specific to business is, can I make this sort of interesting enough, because I'm so used to writing in a way that's very clear and very businesslike and sort of almost it's trying to get your mind out of the sort of bullet points mindset and more into the sort of linear paragraph mindset, and allowing yourself to be a bit more lyrical with your writing and with your thinking processes too.
Yeah, it's quite a shift, isn't it? And it's about developing that voice, really,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Your own voice.
Yes, and also I think that's interesting, because I think it's something that when you're writing in a formal business way, you suppress. You kind of, your voice isn't really supposed to be there too much. You're providing facts and information, and I mean obviously it very much varies depending on the kind of writing that you're doing. But yes, kind of allowing yourself to have your own individual voice is very important. Absolutely.
Yeah, and say things with your personality in it. And I guess the problem, because a lot of people say, well, why not just use AI? Because I think there's a lot of that going around at the moment, much to the disgust of most of the publishing world and authors, etc. But the trouble with AI is it's never your voice, is it? It's just somebody else's.
Yes.
How do you help somebody develop a voice so the book is interesting and not just another piece of AI bump that's sent out?
Yeah, well, I think that your voice is always there. I mean, there are two sides to this. We all naturally have a voice and a way of thinking and a way of presenting ourselves, and so you have it, and it's a case of finding it, and you can get help with finding it. But then there are also kind of pragmatic things around it to slightly sort of make it sound a bit less like it's a kind of myth. The choice of sort of sentences, the way that you express things, the way that you describe things, allowing your language to be less formal, all of those things will help. And one of the things that's I think is useful is the interview stage of this process when I'm working with writers, because as I say, I think sometimes we can automatically, all of us, go into quite a formal mode when we're suddenly sitting in front of a Word document or whatever it is. We try and eradicate ourselves. And what a good editor should be able to do for you is to be able to hear when you're speaking your voice and your personality, and kind of pick out not just the elements of your backstory and your business story that are interesting that perhaps you haven't quite noticed, but also the way in which you express things, which for you, of course, as for all of us, comes quite naturally. But when you're meeting someone fresh and you're hearing the way that they depict things, everyone describes things differently, and everyone has a different way of articulating themselves. So it's sort of trusting in the process, really, and as I say, it's allowing yourself to sort of relax your shoulders a bit when you're writing long form.
Yeah, just go with the flow and not worry too much, really, and enjoy it, I guess. Yeah. I mean, these days the publishing side of things has changed hugely. I mean, when I was young, it was only ever traditional publishing. There really wasn't anything else. And then self-publishing came along, and now there's all sorts of hybrid versions and different types of organisations. Can you just talk just quickly about that side of things and what people should just briefly be aware of?
Yes. So traditional publishing has always been is the side of publishing that I've worked mostly in when I've been in-house at publishers, and that's the side of publishing where you as a writer generally find a literary agent, and the literary agent will work with you perhaps on the text, and then will send it out to a number of editors at publishing houses, and hopefully one or maybe more than one will want to publish your book. And there's a lot of sort of kudos around that, and it's a lovely feeling to be chosen and all of that. But increasingly, as the publishing industry has become more and more sort of enormous, in the sense that great big publishers are kind of getting all absorbed into one another, and they're all becoming these great big behemoth publishers, where all the little publishers that used to be separate are now under one great big umbrella. And there are some advantages to that, but also as a kind of response to that, really, lots more little independent publishers have popped up, and so I suppose the different kinds of publishing are sort of traditional publishing via one of what they call the big five, so the big five publishing companies, which would generally be an agented book that would be sold to an editor. Independent publishers, where the model might be the same, you might be agented or you might approach the publisher directly. These are publishers that are perhaps not going to be able to offer you lots of money up front, but what they will offer is a more sort of bespoke experience, I suppose, potentially. I mean, hopefully the big five would offer you, lots of contact with your editor, but it's sort of more guaranteed with a smaller independent publisher. And then, of course, as well as that, there are hybrid publishers and self-publishers, and self-publishing. Hybrid publishers tend to basically go into business with you, I suppose, to publish your book. So they will pay for some of the expenses, but they might expect you to pay for some of the expenses as well. So what they will offer you is kind of editorial services, generally sales, distribution, jacket design, things of that nature. They sometimes expect a financial contribution, but the payoff of that is that the profit split is much better. So you would be on a 50-50 royalty, for example. So they're sort of saying, we're going into partnership to publish this, and here's what we can offer you in exchange for potentially you giving us some money. They don't always ask for money, but sometimes they will. And again, the payoff is that we're splitting the proceeds, and you're going to get much more for every copy of the book sold. And then self-publishing, of which there are numerous examples of success. I think it's one of those areas that's really grown. It tends to work very well for sort of in fiction terms, for sort of a particular kind of genre fiction. So, romantasy is huge at the moment, for example. And so if you self-publish a romantasy book, there's no guarantee, because I think there's probably quite a lot of them around, but you have a kind of ready-made online readership that are potentially going to be interested in buying your self-published book. And I think that can apply to business books too. I think people aren't necessarily... if they're looking for a particular topic or a particular area of business that they want to learn more about, searching online is a way to do it, and it being kind of published by a traditional publisher isn't necessarily at the forefront of anyone's minds. In terms of how it works for you as an author, of course, the downside of self-publishing is simply that you need to be kind of quite good at your own marketing and quite good at getting out there, probably on social media a bit, and promoting yourself, and you have to probably swallow expenses like copy editing and proofreading for your own book, because you want it, even if you're self-publishing, especially if you're self-publishing, you want it to be in the best shape possible. Spending money having a jacket that's designed rather than just plonking a photograph on it or whatever, making sure you do it professionally. So there are expenses to it, but at the same time, then it's out there and it's available. So it gives you a sort of freedom.
And if it sells, you take all the profit yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you hear examples of books that do very well that are self-published and that then eventually get, a big publisher will swoop in and pick up the author because, they want a piece of the action. And then, of course, it's up to you as the author to either say, oh, yes, okay, fine, I'll go with the traditional publisher, or say, actually, I'm doing very well by myself, thank you very much.
Yeah. Leave me alone, you had your chance.
Yes, exactly.
Put me down. Yeah. That's great. So if somebody was going to do something this week to get it going, what would you suggest they do?
I would suggest that they sit down and just write a single paragraph who are you writing for, and what do you want them to take away from the book? Not the subject, not the chapter headings, just that one thing. Who is the book for, and what do you want them to take? What do you want the reader to take away from it? And if you can do that really clearly, then I think you have a book there. And if you can't, then you still may have a book there, but it's probably just something that you need to sit and think about. You know, who am I writing this for? Is this for potential clients? Is this for a sort of inner circle of people that I just want to know about want to know my life story and what I've been doing and how I've got here and how this has all worked? Is it for your employees? Is it for general readership? And the reason that you want those people to read it, as in, what is the story? What is the story that you want them to take away? So I think that would be the first thing. Just really think about that. Who is it for and what's the story? And go from there.
That's brilliant, Helen. Thank you so much for your help today. I'm sure people have found that really useful. And if they want to get hold of you, where's the best place?
So my website is Francis Literary Consultants, so they can find me there.
No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll put the details on with the podcast as well. And I'm sure people find that really useful.
All right. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rebecca. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.